Hi, this is Liv Morgan, and you are listening to No One Knows, a deep dive podcast into the mysterious death of Joann Matouk Romain. Last week, we talked about our dead eyewitness, Paul Hawk. If you haven't listened to episode 3 yet, please go back and listen to get yourself up to speed on where we're taking off in episode 4. I do have a few things that I'd like to recap, and I would like to note that I'm going to investigate further, especially after some of the information I was given about Paul Hawk from his brother Kenny. First and foremost, I would like to find out who conducted the autopsy of Paul Hawk. I wonder if there's any connection between the medical examiner who completed Paul's autopsy and Spitz. Remember, Spitz was the second medical examiner who completed Joann's autopsy. In regards to the autopsy report, I have a text out to Kenny. I just want to see if it's possible we can get any other information on it. It's important for us to remember something, though. Spitz was also the Macomb County medical examiner who had missed a gunshot wound to the head in a 62-year-old male named David Whitlack. This happened in 2013, and David was actually a resident of Grosse Pointe Farms, but he was an executive banker at the time that he went missing, and it just happened to be 8 months after Joann. Sometimes it may seem like I've got a big tinfoil hat on, but I can't believe that all of these are just coincidences. There's too many connections, and the connections are drawing everybody together. So today on episode 4, we're going to be breaking down one of the largest pieces of evidence that can't be altered, changed, or denied, not even by officials. We're going to be talking about phone records. Whose phone records, you're probably wondering? Tim Matouks. Tim Matouks put up a good fight to prevent Joann's daughter's ability to obtain the phone records during their lawsuit, but they ultimately were successful in obtaining them through a subpoena. Throughout this episode, images, photo recordings, photos, videos are going to be heavily used. We invite you to connect with us on our Instagram page or on our Facebook group at No One Knows Podcast. All source information and links will be included in this episode description. Only once has Tim Matouks spoken out about Joann's case, 11 years after her disappearance and body being found. He went on an interview with Karen Drew from Local 4 News. Tim discusses how his phone records can tell you where he was at any given time. However, there's only one thing that he fails to tell you. He fought for no one to see them. I don't understand why someone who is innocent would fight so hard to keep phone records from being released. Despite Tim Matouks' best efforts, I honestly believe that he failed to take into consideration that this case would go on for some time, and there would be future technology. And the fact is that sometimes time is on our side. Let's refresh our memory. Paul Hawk came forward just days after Joann was seen at the water's edge. He identified Tim Matouks. Hawk identified and worked with an artist to create sketches. There are many similarities between the sketch and Tim Matouks, but I am particularly drawn to the dimple under his chin. What they've also failed to tell you is this. The police officers that were involved in investigating this case did not vet Tim Matouks. They did not take Paul Hawk as a credible witness. So, what did the lawyers and the family do of Joann? If the police who are involved and are not investigating, what would they do? They created a lineup. A few different people, some politicians, some regular civilians off the road. Tim Matouks was in the mix. Do you want to guess who Paul Hawk picked out immediately? Tim Matouks. Another individual in a fedora-style hat appears alongside the sketch of someone looking like Tim Matouks. Who is this person in the fedora hat? Is this somebody that we know? Perhaps this is a person that can help us crack open the case. Now that we've got all of that out of the way, it seems appropriate to begin with Tim Matouks' phone records, since he states, in quote, "My phone records say it all." Here is his interview with Karen Drew.
I said, Joann, why would you go around telling people that I'm the reason why Joann Matouk has so many problems. She responded she didn't want to talk to me and that I was a troublemaker, and she hung up the phone. I mean, the conversation couldn't have lasted more than a minute. I mean, I've never done nothing to her, I've never done nothing to him. But apparently, their feeling was my involvement in law enforcement must have been the reason. I don't know. Other than that, I can't explain it.
Now, to the night Joann went missing back in January of 2010. What were you doing that night?
I was working. I was on duty, working with a Michigan State Narcotics Task Force. I was in the city of Warren.
What do you say to the family who says, yes, you were working that day, but you were on a radio, no one saw you, you could be basically anywhere in the state on one of those radios?
Well, it's pretty far-fetched. First off, I would never risk my job over that. I would never leave my partners vulnerable.
I would know, if someone was, shirking their responsibilities or trying to sneak out.
Bill Hanger was the lieutenant from Michigan State Police who oversaw Matouk's unit that night. He admits he never saw Tim in person, but believes Tim never left his surveillance unit.
It would be very, very difficult, almost improbable for someone to be able to leave a surveillance.
Matouk says his phone records from that night show he was in Warren. 21 calls made between 3:49 and 8:54, the night Joann went missing. How important are those phone records?
Very important. Tells the whole story for me.
Tim says he wants the accusations to stop.
It's just a constant abuse. It's just a constant harassment. And you just, at the end of the day, I want to clear my name.
But remember, the case of Joann Matouk Romain is still not closed. From your gut, was Joann murdered or did Joann kill herself?
In my opinion, there's one set of footprints that go down to the water. That says a lot. None return. Now, whether she went down there for whatever reason and slipped and fell in, who knows?
My phone records tell it all. This information really tells it all. Let's go back and examine the records to see how they led me to question certain people and the relationship that they've had with Tim Matouks. The time that I have spent going through Tim Matouk's phone records was beyond hours and weeks. When I looked at it for the first and second time, everything seemed to be fine. Nothing stood out. As I broke down the names, locations, and who the phone numbers are linked to, I began to find a pattern. I sat with Joann's daughters going over the names of the people we already knew. Family members like Bill, distant cousins, nieces, nephews. But what about everybody else? Our first step was to create a list. From that list, we would search and find who was associated with that phone number. Now, a lot of the phone numbers can link to somebody currently and previously been linked to somebody else. But the main thing is, there are many people who have died, moved, and gotten new phone numbers since this case had first been reported 14 years ago. But the good thing about the internet, there's always a paper trail of everything that has happened. Following the collection of names, we called, searched social media, contacted family members. We wanted to find out if anybody knew anything about Tim Matouks. We had to find out who would speak to us and who wouldn't. Further investigation was needed to discover why they may have appeared on his phone records in 2010. The more we searched, the more we began running into people like judges, police officers from other departments, trucking companies, and boating companies. A person listed on his phone record does not necessarily indicate that they are a criminal or have anything to do with Joann. But at the time, Tim Matouks did work in law enforcement. But the problem is, the records that were subpoenaed that we have are not those of a law enforcement phone. These are his personal cell phone records. While I know this has been a long-awaited episode, since this is a real-time investigation, everything we have encountered, we've had to investigate thoroughly. I did have the opportunity to speak with several important people this past week, some of whom wish to remain anonymous for safety reasons. In the court documents, the subpoenaed phone records that have been made available to me is a period from January 1st, 2010 until the end of March of 2010. It would be there that a phone number associated with the name Ed Milam would talk to Tim Matouks 31 times during that period. The first call between Tim Matouks and Ed Milam took place on January 4th, 2010. The majority of the phone calls between the two would last between 1 and 5 minutes, with a few exceptions. That first phone call between Ed Milam and Tim Matouks in January of 2010 was 8 minutes long. They would talk the longest on January 12th, the day that Joann would end up going missing. That phone call would be 18 minutes. The phone call on January 12th happened just right before Joann would arrive at St. Paul's Catholic Church in Grosse Pointe Farms. Joann arrived just a few minutes after the prayer service had began at 7 p.m., and the phone call ended at 6:56. I do need to note, the phone record indicates that the call originated in Warren and ended in Pontiac, Michigan. Tim Matouks was not physically located that evening, so who is to say that somebody didn't have his phone in another city to better prove an alibi? For me, I find it rather interesting who they are talking to versus where they were when the call took place. This phone belonged to Tim Matouks, but no one saw him or physically placed him at the drug bust that evening. So, is it possible somebody else had his phone? Whatever the case may be, Tim Matouks and the phone number associated with Ed Milam spoke that night. Then they would talk for 11 minutes on February 8th, 16 minutes on March 12th, and 16 minutes on March 31st. So, without Ed Milam and Tim Matouks knowing each other, what would they be talking about? Despite this phone number being linked to all the previous and current addresses of Ed Milam that he's ever lived at, he claims he has no idea how this phone number has been linked to his name. He has never owned this phone number and is never associated with Tim Matouks. But we're going to get to that. In addition to Tim Matouks' phone call logs, this is something that caught my eye when I was going through evidence. The Grosse Pointe Academy administrative team, somebody from that team, made a call the same evening that Joann went missing on January 12th of 2010. They stated that located in the school parking lot, tucked away behind bushes and facing towards the church, was a strange white Mercedes SUV that they had never seen before. The eyewitness noted that they had never seen this car before that day, and the odd thing is the way that it was parked. There has never been another sighting of the white SUV in that lot before or after January 12th, 2010. So, the night that Joann goes missing, Ed Milam and Tim Matouks speak on the phone, and the call ends right before the prayer service begins. It has been reported by witnesses in the church that Joann arrived late, just a few minutes after the service had began. Upon entering the church, she sat alone in the back, the last one in and the first one out. Could it be that somebody she didn't know was already in the church and the Mercedes SUV was waiting for her outside for after? To be honest, it sounds like a perfect scenario. There are too many out of the ordinary happenings this evening, and too many people have come forward to question where Tim Matouks was on January 12, 2010. In addition to Paul Hawk describing Tim Matouks at the water's edge, numerous people called officials stating that they had seen two men wearing the same attire that Hawk described at the water's edge. Several tales of individuals align, a fedora hat on the individual, the gentleman passing them on. How can eyewitnesses who are not connected tell similar stories about who they saw, but they are not believed to be credible by investigators? Grosse Pointe Woods and Grosse Pointe Farms record keeping was terrible and has contained many errors. But Joann's family did not learn about Paul Hawk as an eyewitness until a year after Joann had already been found. Keeping information close to the vest is understandable in order to protect the integrity of a case, but that wasn't the case here. No further investigation was ever conducted into Tim Matouks. It's like they took Paul Hawk's information and totally discarded it. Back to the phone records. So what do I do when I have 3 months worth of telephone records you start noticing a pattern. It would further lead me down a rabbit hole of Reddit, endless voicemails, and some more questions than when we had probably started this podcast. In spite of the fact that Tim Matouks spoke with Ed Milam a lot, Ed Milam still claims he doesn't know who Tim Matouks is. Ed Milam records link him to that phone number, and like I said, every place he's ever lived, worked, relationship he's had, family members. There's just something so fucking odd about it. Using Ed Milam's name as a crossword puzzle, I began digging and digging. In the log, I started looking for his number, linked his name, and then found out who else Tim spoke with around that time. Do you know what I found? Like pieces of a puzzle? So many of the same names. This is his personal cell phone. Despite working in law enforcement and having the capabilities to contact these individuals from a work phone or a radio. Here are the names that continue to catch my eye in the phone records. As we've said, Ed Milam. Andrew Pazachowski, he was a detective sergeant in GPW at the time. There are a few phone numbers associated in Canada. Let's not forget, that's where Joann's body was found. Marco Rubiano. Lisa Monicola and Michael Almiranti work for GPPD. Richard Coretti was a local judge. Tim Matouks' home phone number. William Hanger, who is Tim Matouks' boss. Gregory and Darlene Marquardt, they are Tim Matouks' cousins. Bill Matouks' home line, and the Wood Wine and Liquor Store. The phone calls happen one after another. The minute he hangs up with one, he would make a call to the next. So, from January to March, he spoke with Ed Milam 31 times. 3 of those times were on January 12th, the day that Joann went missing. Marco Rubiano, he talked to him 54 times between January and March. 8 of those times were between the 11th of January and the 12th of January. He talked to Richard Coretti 96 times, 4 times on January 12th, the day that Joann went missing. William Hanger, 71 times. 5 of those times he talked to them on January 12th, the day that Joann went missing. He called Bill Matouks' home line 71 times. All the calls were made after January 12th. Bill Wine's store, he called 73 times before and after January 12th, but not on January 12th at all. He talked to the Marquards 72 times before and after January 12th, not on January 12th at all. Andrew Pazachowski, he talked to him 21 times before and after January 12th. And then there is an unknown number. I have tried to contact it multiple times. I get an answer and a hang up. But that number starts with a 519 and it is an unknown Canadian number. He talked to him 3 times, and once was the day before that Joann would go missing. So what do these phone records indicate? First and foremost, they indicate communication between Tim Matouks and the individuals. The question is, though, who are these people? What made me choose their communication as the most important? In order to gather their information, what sources did I use? Have I contacted them? Here is a breakdown of every single person that I've been able to find. Throughout this season, we have already discussed Ed Milam. Ed Milam confirmed that the listed phone number is not his after speaking with him, even though the phone number, like I've said 100 times, links to every address he's ever lived at, current and past jobs, past phone numbers, and family members. Despite what he says, I believe his involvement is still ongoing. There will be truth, even if it's hidden in a haystack. Here is partial conversations with Ed Milam and some of the questions and odd things that he had mentioned that I took note of.
Hello, this is Ed.
Hi, is this Ed Milam?
It is.
Hi, my name is Liv. Do you have a moment to chat?
Who and how do I know you?
You actually don't know me. I'm actually working with a few attorneys and stuff, and I wanted to see if I had a chance to speak with you.
About?
It's actually about the Joann Matouk Romain case and your association.
What is it?
The Joann Matouk Romain case.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that.
Huh. Okay. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Because, like I said, we're working with a few different.
Not really, because I don't have any idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so can I ask you a few questions, and if you feel like you know them or anything like that?
Feel free, but I don't. Go ahead. I'll give you one question anyway.
I'm sorry, what, one question?
What question do you have?
You guys talked around 35 times.
I need you to stop saying that we talked, because we didn't.
So whose phone number?
We talked for I don't know what phone number you're talking about.
Okay, I can tell you the phone number if you could give me just 1 second. I could pull it up
Because
for you.
I've never talked to him, and here's the deal. I need to not be contacted for this. I've already sat and answered all these questions about knowing this guy, and I don't know him, and I don't give a rat's 2 cents who you think I talked to. I've never talked to him.
Okay,
I don't know this
but
man, and somebody's going to have to deal with my attorney if I get another freaking call over this. I don't know this person.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we're correct. You're Charles Ed Milam.
Yep. What does Ed stand for?
I'm sorry, what?
If you know so much about me, what does Ed mean?
Ed is just your middle name. It's what you go by.
No, my name is not Ed. You don't know that. What does Ed stand for?
Edward? What?
Yeah, you don't know. I did not talk to this man.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
I don't know who you're talking about.
I'm not understanding the.
There's other people. There's people with the same name. I don't know who you're talking to, but I'm not that guy. Never had that number in my life.
Never had that number.
Never.
Okay. So this is the thing. That phone number currently still links to you. So this is where
it links to somebody, but it does not link to me.
Okay.
It's not me.
It links to your name. So if it's not you,
okay,
then it's somebody else that has your information and your name.
Where it came from? That's not my number. It's a number I've never had. I don't know another Charles Ed Milam.
You're not a junior or a senior or anything?
No.
Okay, and you don't have a child by this.
I've never had that number. I've never had that number. I've never talked to anybody in Detroit. I've never spent any time down there. Not my number. You can tell me, well, here's the thing. When I pull up the computer, it's attached to your name. I didn't do any of the things you're talking about, and I don't know any of the people that you're saying that I probably know. And you can keep saying, well, here's the thing. It says it on the computer. I don't care what your computer says. I didn't do any of those things, and I didn't talk to anybody.
And I understand the defensive-ness with it, but I have a hard time because somebody was murdered.
So are you saying that I'm lying?
I mean, I find it odd.
Is that what you're saying?
I find it odd.
Well, why don't you subpoena me? You can subpoena me, and we'll talk in court.
And I find it odd that you're now a pastor as well. Hello? Okay. Do you still have a good relationship with Pepsi? Or did you guys leave on...
I have a great relationship with Pepsi.
Okay.
I left because I was going into the ministry.
Okay.
And they were happy for me, and I left on good terms.
Okay, great. So this is another way to where if this phone number is connected to you and obviously it's not yours, maybe there's a possible way that we could get the Pepsi records to show you've never been to, Tim Matouks' family store, because you have to think.
I don't know what Tim Matouks' store. What
Woods.
What store are you talking about?
The family owns Woods Wholesale Wine.
I've never heard of that place either.
Yeah, it's in the Grosse Pointe area.
Yeah, never been to Grosse Pointe like that.
Okay. You've never been there?
I can tell you, I've never spent any time in Grosse Pointe other than to drive through it on the highway.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
I haven't spent maybe hours in Detroit. That's about the length of time I've spent working in Detroit.
Okay. So if we needed to, or if you were able to get a hold of Pepsi, and I don't know if they'll have records from 2010, but if that...
I'm not going to be able to do that. I don't know how I would even attempt to do that. They're attorneys, and they're going to want to know why I want this, and I can't. I don't know how...
You're a pastor, you have a family. I'm not saying he's going to do anything to you that's not... But I just don't want anybody who has...
Well, what I'm concerned about is my name keeps getting drug into this, and
Yeah.
somehow I get put in the spotlight about this, and then he knows who I am, and I don't know this guy, and suddenly he starts causing me problems.
I don't think that would be the case. I think if you weren't involved in
I
it,
would hope not.
he would
because
stay...
I'm not involved. I've never been involved.
Yeah, if you weren't
I don't
involved
know
in it,
any of
he
these
would stay
things.
far away from you. That's...
Well, I hope I hope he does, because I have nothing to do with it, and I've never talked to him.
Yeah, we're just trying to...
Never.
You know, there's a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of...
Not in my story.
No. Just in... You know, but that's why I was coming at you from the way of, okay, if you were...
I get it.
Hypothetically, if you were involved, you should be concerned. And I was talking to you because the family is concerned. If you were involved, you have children, they don't want anything to happen to anybody. That was... And they were calling and saying, listen, if he drove somewhere, whatever, we'll figure it out. We just need to be able to...
Well, you can let them know that I have nothing to do with it. I will help where I can. Let me know what I can do to clear my name and my association. What did this lady do to deserve this? Was she involved in something, or was she just an innocent bystander in the wrong place at the wrong time?
That's what we want to know. So we have our theories. We know that there's a lot of corruption within the police down there and the involvement with them. And we think that they're, like you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about possible human trafficking and things like that. We know there was cocaine involved. We think that, so right before she went missing, probably 2 or 3 weeks, she walked in on we don't know what it was. One of her daughters dropped her off to talk with her brother. And when she came out...
At the church?
Not at the church, at their liquor store. And when she talked to the brother...
At the store.
She came out and told her daughter, if something happens to me, it was Tim Matouks. And then it was...
And then something happened to her.
2 weeks later, she was dead.
Oh, my God.
She was never found, though. She was not found until 70 days later. So they said that she went...
over in Canada. So they found her over in Canada.
Correct.
Oh, my God.
But her body had never gone down the river. That's the thing. Her body was dumped there.
In Canada?
In Canada.
Yeah, because if it was gone that long, it would have been terribly... Condition of the body would have been horrible.
Yes, it would have been.
Now, that's kind of scary.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
That's awful.
No gunshot wound.
So she just vanished. So there was tracks down to the water's edge. And
Correct.
that was it?
Yes.
And her body's gone. And then she appears 70 days later in a town in Canada floating up on the side of the water.
Yes.
Yeah, that's got all kinds of ugly on it. I see why you need to catch this guy. This guy's dirty. This guy's bad news.
Yep. And Joann...
And he's still an active cop? This dude's still an active officer?
Yeah, he works for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Oh, my God. So he's got resources at his disposal.
Correct. Yep.
So what kind of situation is this going to put me in if I suddenly am being called in to do these things and this guy gets hot and bothered over me?
I don't think you have anything to worry about if you weren't involved.
Because I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't need this heat. But if I can clear my name by coming down, I'll drive to Detroit. If I need to meet you in West Bloomfield, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's that important, and that's what I told the guys when I drove to Flint. I'll drive wherever you want because I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know any of this stuff, but if I can clear my name and help maybe give some clarity to something, I'm in.
It's
because I don't have anything to hide.
Yeah. Her body was found, and obviously being in the water washes away any...
Now, are they saying it was it in the water for 70 days?
Personally,
because if it was in the water for 70 days, there's no way that body would even be identifiable. Of 70 days of soaking in that river. You throw an animal carcass in there for 2 weeks and it's a mess.
Yeah, so I personally looked.
A 70-day body doesn't sound like it would be even remotely able to be tested. It would just be a soggy piece of nothing.
I actually looked at the autopsy photos. I was given them, and I will tell you that I don't think that her body was in that water for 70 days. She was 100% dumped.
I would agree with you 100% without seeing the pictures. I would agree with you. There's no way they could identify a body that would be and pull it out and say this has been in there for 70 days. That autopsy picture would not be a 70-day-old body if they can look at it, because it'd be soggy and nasty. Meat coming right off the bones.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's the concern that I would have is how did the body wash up 70 days later that looks like it hasn't been in the water for 70 days?
You are asking all the questions that we are also asking.
And so, I'm right there with you trying to figure this out because I don't know any of it, but logic makes sense.
Yep, and a lot of the body, only one hand was eaten, not even eaten by an animal. I mean, you could still see the nail polish on her fingernails.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do, that's not 70 days in that St. Clair River or wherever it was. It was down farther than the St. Clair River.
Yeah, it started in the St. Clair River.
And floated down, supposedly.
Supposedly, that's what they're saying.
Right. So you can go back to the family and you can tell the family that I'm cooperative with whatever they need.
Okay.
I don't know anything. But if I need to do something to clear my path or clear the thing to get them to know that A, I'm safe and no one's going to come after me and I don't know anything, and B, if it eases their mind to know that I'm not, I'll meet with the family face to face. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay, great.
My heart goes out to them. It's a tragedy. It's awful.
It is. And at the end of the day, the family wants to make sure that whoever was involved gets their time. But then, also honoring the people that, they've said multiple times, if at any point somebody was involved, it's never too late to make right. They know that Joann was very, very strong in her faith, so they've kind of used that faith-based where they're saying, God would want you to do the right thing. And I mean, you could probably attest to that being a pastor.
And honest to God, if my conscience would not be settled if I was a part of this, and I in good conscience, there's no way I could pastor.
Yeah.
I'd be the biggest hypocrite walking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's why they've always said, people make bad choices and sometimes they turn their life around, and so they've always told people as Joann would live, by Christ and things like that.
I hear you. I feel that. I live that. And whatever I can do to help clear their mind that I'm not involved, and whatever I have to do, I'll do it.
Okay,
I've done it once, I'll do it again. They didn't make me take a polygraph test last time, but I told them I would.
Okay.
And they never pulled the trigger on that, but I certainly would do it because I don't have anything to hide.
Yes, and I just want to leave this.
It gets me excited.
I want to leave this with you, and you've said multiple times you're not involved. If at any point something changes, and let's say you were, and you have a coming to, it stays on the table. The family has made it very clear they just want to.
So if you're saying that just as a disclaimer, right? If somehow I have a change of heart, want to change my story.
Yes.
They're gonna go ahead and say, okay, cool. We're not gonna have any hard feelings. Just give us the info.
Yes.
If I had info, I would give it to you.
Yes.
Honest to God, I'd give it to you.
That's what the family wants to make sure that.
If I can help you find it, I will. If you can ask me questions, and I'll give you what I got. I did already with the phone numbers. I'll tell you everything I know.
Awesome.
I wish I knew. I guess I wish I knew more, but I don't.
Yeah. Understandable. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I will relay information to the family, and if they feel that they need to reach out for polygraphs or anything along those lines, then we'll do that.
Sounds like a plan. Let's let me know. I want my name out of this loop, right? I'm not a part of this, and if this can clear me, do it.
So what does it mean for Ed Milam? I have no idea. Honestly, I feel for the guy, because if he's not involved, how horrible would that be? But a part of me still keeps coming back to those phone numbers. How can they be linked to somebody and it not be your number? And not just like a clerical error where somebody typed it in wrong, but like every time, and no matter what source you search it on, it comes back to him. I don't know. That's something for a later time. But we need to get on to the rest of the call log because it's important. Andrew Pazichowski is currently serving as head of the Public Safety Department in Huntington Woods, but at the time was a detective sergeant in Grosse Pointe Woods at the time. The ones responsible for investigating the disappearance of Joann Matouk Romain. I don't understand why Tim would speak with him before and after. The conflict of interest is immediate. How could Andrew be in constant communication with the number one person of interest before and after she disappeared? Are you following what I'm saying? Marco Rubiano is currently now dead, but according to a few people and a few sources, I have heard that he was in the coke dealing industry back in the day. Lisa Manicola and Michael Almiranti were listed in a lawsuit from an altercation that took place in the early 2000s where accessible force was used in an arrest. In addition, Lisa Manicola sued the city of Grosse Pointe in 2010, claiming sexual harassment, hostile work environment, retaliation, and a failure to promote her to the DB. Lisa sued the Department of Grosse Pointe for sexual harassment, another character statement to the type of department that was being run. I also came across an article titled 4 Michigan Defendants Plead Guilty to Conspiracy to Defraud the IRS. Carol Almiranti was listed as one of the defendants. As the connection between the two, I'm not sure, but I am curious because of the uncommon last name. My sources suggest that they are related, but I can't be sure. On to Richard Coretti. He was a judge at the 16th District Court in Macomb and Tim Matouks' former brother-in-law. Tim's sister, Nancy Coretti, was once married to Judge Richard Coretti. Richard Coretti was reported to be violent and an extreme alcoholic by many sources. William Hanger. He was the detective lieutenant at Michigan State Police and Tim Matouks' boss at the time. He would go on record stating that he didn't see him that night. He couldn't physically place him in Warren, but he doesn't believe that Tim Matouk would abandon his unit. Bill Matouk. This is Joann's brother and the owner of the wine store. Remember, Joann had showed up unannounced to Bill Matouk's wine store, and when she had gone in to speak to him, came out less than 5 minutes later, stating and telling Michelle that she needed to go pray. She was more freaked out than when she had entered. Want to know something odd? Bill Matouk's phone number shouldn't be on Tim Matouks' call log, because Bill had actually called Tim's younger brother a few days after Joann went missing and asked for Tim Matouks' phone number because he was in law enforcement and could possibly help us find Joann. But Bill already knows Tim's phone number, but he doesn't mention it on the phone. Isn't it strange that Bill Matouk would call Tim Matouks' little brother and ask for this number? They've already been talking before and after Joann goes missing. They probably didn't think that the phone records would ever be released. So this was probably an attempt to justify their previous conversations after people started hinting at Tim Matouk being involved. I do believe that Bill helped Tim, allowing Tim to use the store as a funnel for money, drugs, or sex trafficking. The Marquants are Tim Matouk's cousin on his mother's side. Initially, I only included them because of how many phone calls were made. But once I further investigated, I realized that they were cousins. But when I made a phone call to the Marquants before I knew that they were cousins, I asked them, "Do you know who Tim Matouk is?" kind of gave me a little bit of information. But I asked, why did you speak to them during this time? Can you give me any information, anything like that? In the background is what sounds to be a woman yelling that the case is closed. The case is closed. The gentleman tells me they don't speak about the case. He doesn't talk to Tim Matouks. But why did he speak to Tim Matouks 70 times from January to March? The Marquandts also own a boat. I've always wondered what was used to get rid of Joann, or to even hide her body before they could dump her. Remember, it would be too obvious to put her in Bill, John, Tim, anywhere that people would think to go to first. Let's face it, we already know she didn't float down the river. I'm not saying that the Marquandts are involved. They are Tim's cousins. They're allowed to talk. There's no crime against that. But what I have an issue with is the call that I made to them. The call that sounded like they didn't want to give me any information. But the biggest thing was the lady in the background yelling, telling me that the case is closed. I also find it hard to believe that at the time that Joann went missing, this is Tim's cousin, okay? So the Marquandts never thought to contact Tim and say, hey, what's going on with your cousin? We see she's missing. But they talked 70 times from January to March during the time period where this is very much in the news and very much involved in the community. The whole situation to me is odd. But in the end, what we conclude from all of this is that Tim Matouks' connections with other law enforcement agencies are problematic. The testimony in depositions has shown that Tim Matouks has been violent and has threatened Joann and others in the past. I don't understand why the law enforcement team that was supposed to help find Joann ignored statements pointing towards Tim Matouks. I and Joann's daughters seem to think this could be it. Years later, the person who was allegedly assaulted by Tim Matouks came forward and nothing was done. What if we weren't looking at drugs? What if what we were looking at was some sort of child sex trafficking, child pornography, and drugs? It's not that drug trafficking isn't a problem, but Joann's daughters say that Joann wouldn't risk her life for drugs. She wasn't like that. There must have been more to what she was disclosing to the FBI. Let's not forget, Joann's family can confirm that she went to the FBI. She told them. When reaching out to the FBI, they will tell you they cannot confirm nor deny. Let's hypothetically say that Joann possibly walked in on some sort of sex trafficking, child porn, child molestation, and she knew that she couldn't get in touch with the city that they were in because of the connection that Tim Matouks has had with the law enforcement there. Despite not knowing Tim's phone records, Joann was probably concerned about her safety and his connection to law enforcement. Who do you turn to when somebody holds a position of power and they abuse it? I want to end today's episode with a few final thoughts to prepare you for next week's episode. The name of the person is Theodore Kalasa, or as friends called him, Ted. An openly homosexual man named Ted died at a bar that gay men frequented in 2000. A trained shooter shot Ted while he was sitting in his car from a distance, through the back of the seat, through his chest. So what does Theodore Kalasa have to do with Tim Matouks? Over the years, they were good friends, very close friends. But when Ted died, Tim Matouks didn't mention it to anybody. Ted Kalasa and Tim Matouks, were they lovers? What happened there? I have to further dig into Ted Kalasa. He was the individual that I found this week. I think him being dead has something else to do with this also. Like I've said, Tim Matouks' name goes right along with murder.